There comes a moment in life when you realize that the greatest act of strength is not fighting back, not proving your worth, but walking away. Walking away is not weakness, it is the ultimate form of power. Because when you walk away from a narcissist, you strip them of their greatest weapon, control. A narcissist feeds off your reactions, your emotions, and your need for validation. They create chaos not because they are strong, but because they are weak. They manipulate because deep down, they fear irrelevance. They need you to doubt yourself so they can maintain their illusion of superiority. But the moment you stop playing their game, the moment you choose silence over reaction, distance over confrontation, that is the moment they begin to crumble. You see, a narcissist cannot exist without an audience. Their entire identity is built on external validation, on making others question their reality, while they stand firm in their deception. When you remove yourself, you force them to face something they have spent a lifetime avoiding, the truth of their own emptiness. They will try to pull you back, to bait you with false apologies, with guilt, with anger. But understand this, every attempt to regain control is proof of how much your absence affects them, because your power was never in their hands. It was always in yours. Narcissists operate in a way that thrives on external validation, control, and attention, all of which are essential to their psychological survival. This is known as narcissistic supply, a term used to describe the emotional and psychological fuel that keeps them functioning. They seek out the supply from people around them, relying on admiration, validation, and even negative attention to sustain their fragile sense of self. Without it, they begin to unravel, and their carefully constructed illusion of superiority starts to crumble. The reason narcissists depend so heavily on external supply is rooted in their deep-seated insecurity. Despite projecting an image of confidence, superiority, and self-assurance, at their core, they struggle with a fractured self-identity. Many narcissists have experienced some form of emotional wounding in early life that led them to build a false self, a persona designed to shield them from feelings of inadequacy. However, because this persona is not based on genuine self-worth, it requires constant reinforcement from the outside world. Every compliment, every sign of admiration, and even every argument feeds into their need to feel significant. Unlike emotionally healthy individuals who cultivate self-worth internally, narcissists are entirely dependent on how others perceive them. If they are admired and praised, they feel invincible. If they are criticized or ignored, they experience internal distress, which they will go to great lengths to avoid. This is why they manipulate situations and people, ensuring that they are always in control of how they are perceived. To maintain their supply, they often create environments where they are the center of attention, whether in personal relationships, workplaces, or social settings. They charm, deceive, and even provoke, all to keep the flow of attention directed toward them. For a narcissist, even negative attention can serve as a form of supply. While admiration and praise are preferred, they can also derive power from making someone upset, provoking arguments, or inducing fear. This is because any reaction, whether positive or negative, reinforces their influence over a person. If they can make someone angry, insecure, or desperate for their approval, it affirms their sense of control. This is why they engage in tactics such as gaslighting, guilt-tripping, and emotional manipulation. It is not just about getting admiration. It is about ensuring that they remain at the center of another person's thoughts and emotions. When a narcissist finds someone who is emotionally generous, empathetic, or eager to please, they recognize an opportunity for a steady source of supply. They may initially shower the person with affection, validation, and attention, making them feel special and chosen. However, this phase is merely a setup for future control. Once the person is emotionally invested, the narcissist begins to withdraw their affection, criticize, or manipulate. The inconsistency creates a cycle where the individual tries harder to gain the narcissist's approval, unknowingly reinforcing the power dynamic. The more the person seeks validation, the more the narcissist feels in control. Over time, this dynamic becomes exhausting for the person supplying the narcissist's needs. They may feel drained, confused, and emotionally depleted, yet find it difficult to break free. This is because narcissists are skilled at shifting blame, making the other person feel responsible for the dysfunction in the relationship. They use tactics such as intermittent reinforcement, alternating between affection and withdrawal to keep their supply hooked. This unpredictability creates a psychological dependency where the person becomes addicted to the moments of validation, even if they are rare. A key aspect of narcissistic supply is the illusion of superiority that the narcissist maintains. They carefully craft a persona that makes them appear successful, intelligent, or uniquely gifted. They expect others to affirm this image, and when someone challenges it, they react with hostility, defensiveness, or complete dismissal. Criticism, even when constructive, is perceived as a direct threat to their identity. Rather than reflect on their behavior or consider personal growth, they will attack, deflect, or diminish the person offering feedback. This is why meaningful change is rare in narcissists. Any admission of fault disrupts their need for constant validation. One of the most devastating effects of this reliance on narcissistic supply is that the narcissist rarely develops true emotional intimacy with others. Relationships, whether romantic, familial, or professional, are not based on genuine connection, but on transactional value. People are seen as extensions of their own ego rather than as independent individuals with their own needs and feelings. Once a person stops providing sufficient supply, either by setting boundaries, withdrawing attention, or refusing to be manipulated, the narcissist often discards them and seeks new sources. Despite their outward arrogance, narcissists are deeply dependent on others in ways they would never admit. Without a steady stream of admiration, control, or emotional engagement, they begin to experience a psychological collapse. This is why walking away, refusing to engage, and cutting off their supply is the most powerful response to their behavior. It is not anger or confrontation that affects them the most. It is indifference. When they can no longer extract validation from a person, they are forced to face the emptiness within themselves. This is why narcissistic supply is their lifeline, and why breaking free from their influence is the ultimate act of self-liberation. Detachment is one of the most powerful tools against the narcissist because it directly undermines their ability to control and manipulate. Narcissists thrive on emotional reactions. They gauge their power over someone based on how much influence they have over that person's thoughts, feelings, and decisions. The moment you detach, you disrupt this dynamic, forcing them into a position where their usual tactics no longer work. This shift not only weakens their grip, but also forces them to face an uncomfortable reality. They are losing control. The essence of a narcissist's control lies in emotional entanglement. They need you to feel invested in their opinions, their validation, and even their criticisms. Every argument, every attempt to explain yourself, and every emotional response you give them fuels their sense of power. This is why they provoke reactions, whether through charm, guilt, intimidation, or confusion. Their goal is to keep you engaged, ensuring that your energy remains focused on them. But when you detach, when you stop reacting to their manipulations, their ability to control you begins to fade. Detachment does not mean indifference in the traditional sense. It means reclaiming your emotional independence. It means recognizing that you do not need their approval, their validation, or their recognition to be at peace with yourself. It is a conscious decision to stop participating in their game, to no longer give them the emotional energy they so desperately seek. This is why detachment is so unsettling to a narcissist. They rely on others to validate their reality, to reinforce their sense of superiority or victimhood. When you stop playing along, they are left in a void where their usual strategies fail to yield the results they expect. A key aspect of detachment is understanding that a narcissist's words and actions are designed to provoke a reaction, not to communicate in an authentic way. They use emotional manipulation to keep you engaged, whether through love bombing, guilt tripping, or gaslighting. If you respond, even defensively, you reinforce their influence. But when you detach, when you refuse to be pulled into their cycle of manipulation, you send a clear message. They no longer have power over you. This shift frustrates them, often leading them to escalate their tactics in an attempt to regain control. They may try to provoke you with insults, sudden affection, or even attempts to turn others against you. But if you remain detached, their strategies eventually lose effectiveness. One of the most profound effects of detachment is that it forces the narcissist to confront their own emotional emptiness. Without your reactions, without your energy feeding into their ego, they are left with themselves. something they have spent their entire lives avoiding. This is why narcissists often cycle through relationships, seeking new sources of supply the moment one begins to detach. They cannot handle emotional self-sufficiency because their sense of self is entirely dependent on external reinforcement. By detaching, you force them into an uncomfortable reality where they must either confront their own deficiencies or seek another person to manipulate. The process of detachment is not always easy, especially if the narcissist has conditioned you to seek their approval. Many people struggle with feelings of guilt, self-doubt, or even fear when they begin to pull away. The narcissist may try to reinforce these feelings, accusing you of being cold, ungrateful, or selfish. They might even attempt to play the victim, portraying themselves as the one who has been wronged. These tactics are designed to pull you back into their control, to make you second-guess your decision. However, the key to successful detachment is recognizing that their response is not a reflection of your actions, but of their inability to handle losing control. As you continue to detach, you begin to see the narcissist's behavior for what it truly is, a pattern of manipulation rather than genuine emotion. You start to notice how predictable their tactics are, how every insult, every guilt trip, and every outburst follows the same formula. This realization is empowering because it allows you to disengage without emotional turmoil. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself, to prove your worth, or to seek closure from them. You understand that their validation was never real to begin with. Detachment brings a sense of peace that a narcissist can never experience. While they continue to seek external validation, jumping from one source of supply to another, you develop emotional resilience. You learn to validate yourself, to set boundaries without fear, and to prioritize your well-being over their demands. This is the ultimate victory, not in a battle against them, but in reclaiming your own power. The narcissist loses control, not because you fought them, but because you simply stopped engaging. And in that moment, you become free. Narcissists thrive on the reactions they provoke from others. They rely on emotional responses, whether positive or negative, to feed their sense of control and superiority. Every reaction reinforces their influence, making them feel powerful and relevant. Whether it's admiration, anger, frustration, or desperation, any form of engagement gives them the validation they crave. This is why they go to great lengths to provoke emotions in those around them. They may use charm to draw you in, insults to break you down, or guilt to manipulate your decisions. Regardless of the method, their goal is the same: to elicit a response that confirms their ability to affect your emotional state. When you deny a narcissist the reaction they seek, you disrupt this dynamic entirely. Their entire sense of control is built on the idea that they can manipulate how you feel and behave. The moment you stop reacting, they lose their grip. They push buttons that once worked, expecting you to defend yourself, explain your actions, or seek their approval. But when their provocations are met with indifference, they are left unsettled, confused, and frustrated. The power they once held begins to fade, and they are forced to confront a truth they desperately avoid: that their control over you was an illusion. This lack of reaction does not mean tolerating mistreatment or suppressing your emotions. It means choosing where to direct your energy and refusing to engage in their games. Narcissists thrive on cycles of conflict and reconciliation, where they create chaos only to offer temporary relief. They test boundaries to see how far they can push before you react. If you argue, they win. If you justify yourself, they win. Even if you express pain, they still win, because they have successfully drawn you into an emotional exchange where they remain in control. But when you refuse to engage, when their words and actions no longer affect you, they are left with nothing to fuel their ego. This is why narcissists often escalate their behavior when they sense they are losing influence. They may increase their efforts to provoke you, using more aggressive tactics or emotional manipulation. They might try to insult you in ways that previously triggered a response. They may bring up past wounds, twist reality to make you doubt yourself, or try to make you jealous or insecure. They do this not because they have gained power, but because they are desperate to regain it. They need to know they still have control over your emotions, and if one tactic fails, they will quickly shift to another. If emotional attacks do not work, they might change their approach entirely. Instead of anger, they may suddenly act loving, remorseful, or victimized, trying to pull you back in through guilt or sympathy. They may claim they have changed, offer an apology, or even pretend to take responsibility. But these tactics are not rooted in genuine self-awareness. They are last-ditch efforts to reclaim your engagement. The moment you react, whether with hope or skepticism, they sense an opening and begin to manipulate once again. But when you remain detached, when you neither respond to their cruelty nor fall for their false kindness, they are left with no way to maintain control. One of the greatest challenges of denying a narcissist the reaction they crave is overcoming the internal conditioning they have instilled in you. If they have spent months or years training you to respond in certain ways, breaking free from that pattern takes conscious effort. They may have convinced you that setting boundaries makes you selfish, that ignoring them is cruel, or that defending yourself is pointless, but these beliefs are part of their manipulation. The truth is, your lack of reaction is not about punishing them. It is about protecting yourself. It is about breaking free from a cycle where your emotions are used as weapons against you. Over time, as you consistently deny them the reaction they seek, they begin to lose interest. A narcissist has no real emotional depth, no ability to form genuine connections, and no desire for mutual respect. Without a source of supply, they become restless, frustrated, and eventually seek someone else to manipulate. They do not stick around where they are no longer in control. This is why disengagement is the most effective strategy. Not confrontation, not reasoning, but the simple act of refusing to give them the fuel they need. The more you practice emotional detachment, the stronger you become. You realize that your power was never in their hands, that their words hold no true meaning, and that their validation was never necessary. You begin to shift from a state of emotional reactivity to one of self-possession, where your peace is no longer dictated by their behavior. And in this shift, the narcissist's power fades. They crave reaction, but when you deny it, they are left with nothing. And that is where their illusion of control finally breaks. Narcissists build their entire identity on the illusion of superiority, control, and admiration. They see themselves as special, deserving of constant validation, and entitled to the unwavering attention of others. Because their self-worth is entirely dependent on external reinforcement, rejection is something they simply cannot handle. It shatters the carefully constructed image they have created and exposes the deep insecurity they work so hard to hide. Unlike emotionally healthy individuals who can process rejection as a normal part of life, narcissists perceive it as a direct attack on their worth and an unbearable blow to their fragile ego. Rejection in any form triggers intense emotional distress for a narcissist because it contradicts their need to feel significant. Whether it is being ignored, denied attention, or having someone set boundaries against them, they interpret it as humiliation. This is why they react so aggressively or manipulatively when faced with rejection. Instead of accepting it with grace or introspection, they lash out, seek revenge, or try to regain control through guilt, manipulation, or charm. Their goal is not to understand why they were rejected, but to reverse the situation so they can restore their sense of dominance. One of the most common ways a narcissist responds to rejection is through rage. This is known as narcissistic injury. When their self-premium is threatened, they experience an intense internal wound that they cannot tolerate. The anger they display is not just frustration. It is a desperate attempt to regain the power they feel slipping away. They may insult, belittle, or degrade the person who rejected them. This is not because they genuinely believe the insults they throw, but because they need to convince themselves that they are still in control. If they can make the other person doubt themselves, it helps ease their own feelings of inadequacy. If direct aggression does not work, narcissists may shift their approach to manipulation. They may try to guilt trip the person who rejected them, playing the victim and making it seem as though they are the ones who have been wronged. They might act heartbroken, exaggerate their suffering, or bring up past moments of affection to make the other person second-guess their decision. This tactic is especially effective on empathetic individuals who do not want to hurt others. The narcissist knows this and exploits it, hoping to pull the person back into their control by making them feel responsible for their emotional state. Another way narcissists cope with rejection is by quickly seeking new sources of validation. Since their self-worth is externally dependent, they cannot sit with the discomfort of rejection for long. They may immediately pursue another person to boost their ego, engage in attention-seeking behavior, or even fabricate stories of success to create the illusion that they are unaffected. This is why they often flaunt new relationships or accomplishments soon after being rejected. They want to appear as though they have moved on effortlessly, even though internally they are consumed by the fear of losing their status and significance. Narcissists refuse to accept rejection at all. Instead of respecting a boundary, they persist, believing that they can wear the other person down over time. They may continue to reach out, make false promises of change, or show sudden acts of kindness in an attempt to win back control. Their persistence is not about love or genuine care. It is about proving to themselves that they can still manipulate the situation to their advantage. If they succeed in getting someone to reconsider, it reinforces their belief that they are irresistible and above rejection. But if their attempts fail, they may turn hostile, smearing the other person's reputation or attempting to devalue them to restore their own wounded pride. Because rejection is so intolerable to a narcissist, they often go to great lengths to avoid situations where they might be turned down. They carefully construct relationships where they are always in a position of power, choosing partners, friends, or colleagues who are more likely to comply with their demands. They avoid accountability, ensuring that they are the ones who end things first, so they never have to face the sting of being discarded. If they sense someone pulling away, they may preemptively cut ties, framing it as their own decision, rather than experiencing the humiliation of rejection. For those dealing with a narcissist, understanding their inability to handle rejection is crucial. It explains why they react so intensely and why detaching from them can provoke such extreme responses. The most effective way to deal with their reaction is to remain firm and unemotional, refusing to be drawn into their manipulations. Engaging in arguments justifying your decision or trying to explain things rationally only fuels their need for control. The best approach is to stand by your boundaries, remain indifferent to their attempts at retaliation, and recognize that their reaction is not a reflection of your worth, but of their own deep-seated fears. A narcissist's inability to handle rejection is a reflection of their fragile and dependent self-image. They may appear confident and self-assured on the surface, but beneath it lies a desperate need for validation. When that validation is denied, they crumble, revealing the emptiness they have spent their lives trying to escape. And while they may go to great lengths to mask this vulnerability, their exaggerated reactions make one thing clear: rejection is their greatest weakness, and facing it is something they are simply not equipped to do. When you remove yourself from a narcissist's life, a profound psychological shift occurs, both within you and within them. Your absence is not just a physical departure, it is an energetic withdrawal that disrupts the carefully crafted dynamics they depend on for control. Narcissists thrive on validation, attention, and emotional engagement, using others as a mirror to reflect back a sense of superiority and importance. The moment you step away, that mirror shatters, leaving them in an unsettling void where their usual methods of manipulation lose effectiveness. Narcissists survive by maintaining control over their environment, particularly over the people who provide them with a sense of power. They carefully condition others to respond in ways that reinforce their dominance, whether through admiration, compliance, or emotional distress. Your presence, even in conflict, feeds this need, but when you are no longer there to react, to defend yourself, or to seek their approval, the narcissist experiences a sudden loss of influence. They are left with no outlet to project their superiority, no source to regulate their fragile self-esteem, and no validation to uphold the illusion they have created. This disruption causes deep psychological discomfort, forcing them to face an emptiness they have long avoided. In your absence, a narcissist may cycle through different emotional states in an attempt to regain control. At first, they may feel an overwhelming sense of frustration and disbelief. They have conditioned themselves to believe they are irreplaceable, that others will always return, and that their influence is unshakable. When confronted with the reality that someone has chosen to walk away, they experience a form of narcissistic injury, a deep wound to their ego that threatens their carefully protected self-image. This injury can manifest as rage, panic, or a desperate need to restore the power dynamic they once held. One of the most immediate shifts your absence creates is an increased effort on their part to pull you back into their world. They may reach out, pretending to be remorseful, acting as if they have changed, or making grand promises of a different future. If kindness and false charm do not work, they may switch to guilt tripping, intimidation, or even playing the victim. These tactics are not about genuine connection. They are desperate attempts to reestablish the cycle of control. They cannot tolerate the idea that someone has broken free from their influence, so they attempt to rewrite the narrative, convincing you that leaving was a mistake. If their attempts to regain control fail, the psychological shift within the narcissist deepens. They may begin to experience a sense of worthlessness, but rather than processing it in a healthy way, they will project it onto others. They may seek out new sources of validation, immediately jumping into another relationship, flaunting their success, or spreading falsehoods to damage your reputation. Their goal is to convince themselves and others that they were never affected by your absence. But underneath the surface, they are struggling with a reality they cannot accept. They were not as indispensable as they believed. For you, the psychological shift created by your absence is one of empowerment and clarity. In the beginning, detaching from a narcissist can feel unsettling because they have conditioned you to believe that their validation is necessary for your well-being. However, as time passes, you begin to see the manipulation for what it truly was, a carefully orchestrated illusion. Without their constant presence dictating your emotions, your mind clears and you start to regain control over your own thoughts and decisions. The further you distance yourself, the more you recognize the patterns of manipulation that once kept you bound. One of the most transformative effects of your absence is the restoration of your emotional independence. Narcissists create environments where your self-worth becomes dependent on their approval. Whether through intermittent praise or calculated criticism, they keep you in a state of uncertainty, always seeking their validation. But when you step away, that dependency begins to fade. You realize that your worth was never defined by them, and that the peace you feel in their absence is proof that you were never truly benefiting from their presence. The more you embrace this newfound freedom, the stronger your sense of self becomes. You develop resilience, recognizing that their attempts to regain control are simply a reflection of their own fear of irrelevance. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself, to defend your decision, or to justify why you left. You understand that their reaction to your absence is their burden to carry, not yours. Your absence does more than remove you from their influence. It forces them to confront a reality they have long denied. They are not as powerful as they believe. Their control is not absolute, and people can and do walk away. This realization is something a narcissist cannot easily process because it exposes the very truth they have spent their lives avoiding. Without others to manipulate, they are left with nothing but their own emptiness. And that, more than anything, is what they fear the most. Healing begins the moment you remove the influence of a narcissist from your life. Their presence, whether direct or lingering through past experiences, creates an emotional and psychological weight that keeps you trapped in cycles of self-doubt, confusion, and emotional exhaustion. When you finally step away, you begin a process of reclaiming your mind, your emotions, and your sense of self. This transformation does not happen instantly, but with each day of distance, you start to rediscover the inner strength that had been overshadowed by their manipulation. Narcissists thrive on control. They condition you to second-guess yourself, to seek their validation, and to prioritize their needs over your own. Their influence seeps into your thoughts, making you question your worth, your decisions, and even your perception of reality. This is why removing them is not just about physical separation. It is about dismantling the mental and emotional stronghold they have built within you. True healing starts when you no longer allow their words, their actions, or their opinions to dictate how you see yourself and your future. The absence of their influence can feel unsettling. You may find yourself doubting whether leaving was the right decision, wondering if you overreacted, or feeling guilty for cutting ties. This is because they trained you to internalize blame, making you responsible for their emotions and reactions. But as time passes, you start to see clearly how their presence distorted your perception of yourself. You realize that you were never too sensitive, too difficult, or too demanding. You were simply in an environment that thrived on making you feel that way. One of the first signs of healing is the return of your own voice. In a relationship with a narcissist, your thoughts and feelings were often dismissed, minimized, or manipulated. Over time, you may have learned to suppress your opinions, fearing criticism or conflict, but as their influence fades, you start to reconnect with what you truly believe, want, and need. You begin to trust yourself again, making decisions without the fear of their judgment. This self-trust is one of the most powerful aspects of healing because it restores the inner guidance that was once overshadowed by their dominance. As their influence diminishes, your emotional state begins to stabilize. Narcissists create an environment of constant highs and lows. Moments of affection followed by sudden criticism, fleeting approval followed by emotional withdrawal. This unpredictability keeps you in a state of anxiety, always trying to anticipate their next move. But when you remove them from your life, that emotional roller coaster comes to a stop. You no longer wake up wondering what version of them you will get today. Instead, you experience a new and unfamiliar sensation, peace. This calmness may feel strange at first, but over time, you come to appreciate the stability that was missing for so long. Healing also brings clarity. When you are entangled with a narcissist, it is difficult to see the full extent of their manipulation because you are too close to it. But once you step away, you begin to recognize the patterns of control that once seemed normal. You see how they twisted situations to make themselves the victim, how they used guilt to keep you in place, and how they strategically invalidated your emotions to maintain power. This realization is painful, but it is also liberating. It allows you to stop blaming yourself for things that were never your fault and to see the truth of what you endured. As you continue to heal, you begin to rebuild your sense of self. Narcissists strip away your confidence, making you feel small so that they can feel bigger. But when their influence is gone, you start to reclaim the parts of yourself that were suppressed. You remember what makes you happy, what excites you, and what you are passionate about. You begin to set boundaries, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. You choose relationships that uplift you, not ones that drain you. With each step forward, you become stronger, more self-assured, and more resilient. Perhaps the most profound aspect of healing is the realization that you no longer need their approval, their validation, or their presence to feel whole. The power they once held over you dissolves as you recognize that your worth was never dependent on them. You no longer seek closure from them because you understand that closure comes from within. You stop waiting for an apology that will never come and instead focus on giving yourself the compassion and understanding that they never could. Removing a narcissist's influence is not just about cutting them out of your life. It is about breaking free from the psychological chains they left behind. It is about rediscovering who you are without their distortion, reclaiming your voice, and stepping into a future where you are no longer controlled by their presence. Healing is not always a straight path. It takes time, patience, and self-reflection. But with every day that you choose yourself over their influence, you move closer to a life of freedom, self-love, and true peace. When you have been entangled with a narcissist, it is easy to feel like a victim. Their manipulation, control, and emotional games can leave you feeling powerless, drained, and questioning your own worth. You may have spent years walking on eggshells, adjusting yourself to avoid conflict, and bending to their needs while neglecting your own. But the moment you decide to break free from their grip, a profound shift begins. You are no longer just someone who has been hurt. You are someone reclaiming your power. This transformation is not immediate, but as you move forward, you begin to realize that you are not defined by what they did to you. You are defined by how you rise from it. The victim mindset is difficult to shake because narcissists are skilled at making you feel dependent on them. They condition you to believe that you need their approval, that you are incapable without them, or that you are somehow unworthy of better treatment. This belief system can be deeply ingrained, making it hard to see that you have always had the strength to stand on your own. But once you start questioning these false narratives, the illusion begins to crumble. You start to see the manipulation for what it was. A way to keep you small so that they could feel big. One of the first signs that you are shifting from victimhood to empowerment is the moment you stop seeking. Narcissists thrive on control, and one of the most effective ways they maintain it is by making you crave their approval. They condition you to feel that